ask you guys a question that's been really, really getting at me, because I had Dan Kovalik. Now, I've done work with Dan in Nicaragua. We've been to Venezuela together for Alex Saab. He's been in Russia. We went to this Soviet parade together because he's like me, he's a comrade. But he's actually writing this book on Gaza and why you should care. So that'll be out soon. But you should go watch the interview. It's only on my channel. So you guys should go watch it. But I asked this question, right? When will Americans actually do something about what's happening, and what can they do? Because we struggle with this question, both Dan and I. Are you as guilty in your complicity of what's happening in Gaza, or are you also victims? And I've come to the conclusion that it's both victims and also complicit, depending on where you stand on the economic status. If you're a person that's constantly working all the time, barely has time to feed their family, right, and eat, and then go back to work, I feel bad. I don't really take blame for you that you are not as well versed on what's happening in the world. I understand that this is part of the reason that the entire United States relies on this entire thing, that you are overworked and underpaid and tired and want to tune off and find entertainment, because when you're off work, you don't want anything to do with reality, right? So what you do is you tune out and you go about your day. So I understand why people who are in economic stress don't really pay attention to what's going on in the world. But then there's like a lot of people who are, middle class and who have an education and who are still going about their day. And that includes a lot of my friends, a lot of people, they don't have time. They say, they're busy. They understand what's going on. But the most answer that I get is, what can I do about it? What the hell am I going to do about it? I'm just a person. I have to live my life, and so on and so forth. So one of the things I wanted to bring up is this, Jamie, this tweet that I had, because I wanted to show what's been going on too in Rafah for the Convo Couch audience, in case you didn't see my breakdown with Dan, because Israel has continued to attack them after they went through the ICJ hearing, after the ICJ said, well, you have a month to present this case that, this is the potential for genocide, but you have a month to stop, and blah, blah, blah. We've seen that this doesn't work. And Dan, of course, in the interview pointed out the famous ICJ case of Nicaragua versus the United States, because of the United States' support of the Contras and the money that they needed to pay back to Nicaragua. And the United States was found guilty, and they never gave this money. They never were held to account. So why would we continue trusting then in the way of going about this in an electoral way, in a way of international justice? And I think it's important to talk to a lawyer that's a human rights lawyer, right? That's somebody that's going to talk about international justice, and ask them, do you believe in international justice? And he was like, well, clearly it has no teeth. And so then it's like, okay, well, if a person who's has a career on international justice is telling me this isn't working, and the Palestinians themselves are saying we don't really care about international justice because it's never going to come for us, then the only solution I find is that the United States has to be held accountable in accordance with Israel, because who is supplying all the money to Israel is the United States, right? And so if Israel then is held to account, what could enforce that? Well, it would have to be the United States, but the United States isn't going to do that. So then why are American people then willing to continue to pay for children in Gaza to die, for children in the Donbass to die? Because there was an attack today in Belgorod that killed a 4-month-old baby with US and NATO weapons, and killed 5 other people and injured 17. And that was in Belgorod, right? So we have that. Yeah, that's where it is. Okay. And you can go ahead and play it, because it's the so it just shows you the impact of this, right? And I was near there like maybe 10 days ago. Okay. So this happens all the time. This is nothing new here. Okay. And it's sad. But again, the US made weapons thing really bothered me. Seeing these weapons made in the United States, like, it just hits you in the face, because you're like, wow, like, Lockheed Martin, these are the weapons that people who I've known work in this industry, people I grew up with, people I went to school with, they have no idea what this is. They can't all come to Donbass. They don't know. So how do we get people to really understand this? So I want to start by showing you guys in Rafah, right? Because people are obviously being pushed out. Now, this is over 1 million people being pushed out of Rafah, the place they were told to actually go evacuate to by Israel. The last safe zone, they were told. This was the last place that was going to be safe for them. And then, of course, they were attacked. And this is what was called the Super Bowl massacre, right? And you see people walking and being pushed out. Now, Egypt has been told by Israel that they need to take in all these refugees. And if you saw Niko House's report, he went to Egypt and saw that there's no way that Egypt can take all these people, right? They don't have the infrastructure, they don't have the money. And again, I made this comparison the other day too. It's kind of the way that the Nazis were telling European countries to take the Jews. Why don't you take them? Why don't you take them? Put them over here, put them over there. These are people, these are human beings, and we're just trying to they're trying to move them like packages of cargo. And so there's that humane part. But on the other hand, it's just fiscally impossible for any of these countries to actually take them in and be able to support that many people. There's already Palestinian refugees all over the Middle East, in Lebanon, in Jordan. There's a lot of Palestinians there. And these governments from Egypt and Jordan, they're all controlled by the West and Israel. Israel controls, for example, the migration. If you want to go into Jordan, it's Israel that's in charge of letting you in. It's not Jordan itself. So what we have here is this entire ecosystem that's been built to support the United States' foreign policy. I'm not saying Israel isn't guilty of their own, but I am saying without the United States funding, Israel really wouldn't be there. And I don't know if you guys saw this, but I'm going to go ahead and play it. And I am going to say a warning to this because there are some graphic images, but I really wanted people to understand the two crazy worlds we live in, right? And one world we all live in the West or wherever you are, where you have a normal life. You wake up, you go get breakfast, whatever. And everybody was talking about the Super Bowl on Sunday. Everybody in the United States, in the Western world, particularly the United States, families was saying, oh my God, we're going to watch the Super Bowl. We're going to go, what's going to be the halftime show? Who's it going to be? Taylor Swift is going to be there with her boyfriend. All of these things, you're getting all these things. And in another world, Palestinians are literally being killed, picking up their kids in pieces. And is this too much? Should we be maybe not seeing these images? I don't think so. I think these images need to be seen. Obviously, I'm not doing it for war porn. I am doing it so people understand. So graphic images are ahead, but I wanted you to see the Israeli propaganda that was targeted at the American public. That's largely normal. That doesn't really pay attention. And they paid billions of dollars for this. I'm sorry, millions of dollars for this. And just the way they frame it is really disgusting when you see the parallel. So let's just play it really quickly.
To all the dads. The funny ones. The silly ones. The strong ones. The adventurous ones. To all the dads held in captivity by Hamas. In captivity by Hamas. For over 120 days. We vow to bring you home. To bring you home.
Super Bowl Sunday. If you're anything like me, you like to be surrounded by a snack or two while watching the big game. You know, when buying snacks for the game, you might have noticed one thing. Sports drinks bottles are smaller. A bag of chips has fewer chips, but they're still charging it just as much. As an ice cream lover, what makes me the most angry is that ice cream carts have actually shrunk in size. Not a price. I've had enough of what they call shrinkflation. The American public is tired of being played for something. I'm calling on companies to put a stop to this.
والله مرضيت صحي والله مرضيت صحي قلت له لا خليك نايم انا بروح لحالي.
Okay, so I want to show, first of all, I want to address what we just saw, but I also want to show this comment. Oh, not this one. And I understand, Anna and Kate. I understand all of this. Let's see. I wanted to show this. Oh, okay, this one. So people are suffering all over the world, including Hawaii, where I live. I have to focus on the USA before I can commit to helping those who will not thank me or return the favor. Okay, so one, when you help people, you don't do it to be thanked. You just do it to help people. But if we're not going to talk about the empathetic aspect of that, pragmatically, right? The issues that are happening in Hawaii, the issues that are happening in the United States are directly related to what's happening in Gaza. There really is very little separation, and I'll tell you why. The reason being is because all of this money that is exported to Israel and this money that's exported to Ukraine and to whatever military goal objective that we have is not being spent on the American public. And the same people exporting that money are the same people taking away money from the people of Hawaii, the same people buying up property, the BlackRocks of the world. The same apparatus is behind the people who are causing so much harm and so much chaos all over the world, is the same one that is taking away from the American public and creating a public that is so individualistic in the sense of not caring about the rest of the world because they're so busy and focused on themselves that they don't realize that the rest of the world is in problems because of our own government, and you are also in problem because of our own government. Therefore, the two are related. And when you fail to make that connection, what ends up happening is you get angry at your neighbor, you get angry at foreigners, and it just works to their favor because they can continue doing this with no opposition. So the more you have this mindset where I can't even care about that because I need to care about this, which I understand, the more they get away with it, because it's all connected. Where is all of our taxpayer money going? This is exactly what I wanted to do this segment. Why are you okay with sending money over there instead of having money to help the people in your community? And why are you okay that they get to do that? Why are we so focused on some, sort of issue with the migration crisis, right? Oh, because people are coming in to take stuff that we don't have. Well, why are people coming in to take stuff that we don't have? Oh, that's right. We screwed up all their countries over there. Okay. So what would actually stop that from happening? The intervention issue would stop that from happening. So how is that not related to what's happening domestically? It is. Again, it's a failure of seeing these connections in the American public, and that is by design. They don't want you to see these connections. They want you to sympathize with Israel and forget about what we're doing to Palestinians. And by the way, they don't care about the hostages. Israelis have been protesting the hostages, the hostage situation themselves, because the Netanyahu government hasn't really done anything to get them back. They used to trade 3 hostages for 1,000 Palestinians. They're not doing that anymore because their whole goal is to kill Hamas, which we know Hamas is only a resistance group. It's not a terrorist group. And it was said by a UN member. He said Hamas isn't a terrorist group. We've actually worked with terrorists before. Hamas is just a resistance group. So let's put up this tweet by Niko House where there's just more proof. And this is from antiwar.com. I believe if you have it up there, it should be the next one under not about hostages. It says, Jamie. Because I think it's important to point this out. Look, because the whole thing in that propaganda video was bring the hostages home, right? And then we have from antiwar.com from yesterday, February 14th, Netanyahu unilaterally vetoes further hostage deal talks. So it was never about the hostages, was it? No, of course it wasn't. And so you have the own Israelis realizing, wait a minute, I guess our government doesn't really care about us, huh? And of course we have the situation that happened right on October 7th, where the majority of them were actually killed by friendly Israeli snipers that really didn't care if they lived or died because they wanted to get quote unquote Hamas. So again, their priority is exterminating Palestinians because we know those children you saw in those images are not Hamas. We know that they're not Hamas. And even if they were Hamas, it doesn't justify what is actually being done. And that has been said globally by pretty much the entire world, except the United States and the UK, which tells you everything you need to know. So why, next question is why then do we have this scenario? Jamie, can you bring this one up as well? The one next to it, because I think that I keep asking this question and people can't answer, right? What's it going to take? Because look at this. Why are you suffering for Israel to kill kids? Why are you suffering for Ukraine and fascists on both ends, the Zionists and the neo-Nazis, to kill people? So I said this, the average person in the US, while they give billions to the war machine so it can go on killing kids and creating migration problems so you can hate on people who come from these war-torn countries, and the cycle continues. While a few get rich and the rest of you kill each other, because ultimately what they want, guys, is they want us all to turn on each other, right? To fight for a slice of bread. That's what they want. They want the poorest to fight for a slice of bread. So this person said, and this is what I get from so many people. This is just one tweet. 20 years ago, working as a server, I lived in a corner 1-bedroom apartment downtown with amazing water views for $700 a month. A similar apartment now is $3,600 a month, more than 5 times as much. As a lawyer at age 47, I am unable to afford living in the apartment I did at age 27 while waiting tables. Now, I can't tell you how many times this has been just so relevant. People that I worked with when I worked in restaurants as a bartender or a server, and I've done retail, I've done everything, right? And that definitely brings a different experience to when I'm talking about these issues than, some elite guy who worked at CNN because his mom was whatever from whatever family or whatever. You can tell there's a difference in the journalism, by the way, that I could go into a whole tangent as to how that affects how you cover things. But there is elitism in journalism, including independent journalism. So I do want to address this thing because so many people that I knew were actually had master's degrees, had PhDs, had whatever, and they just wouldn't get paid enough to sustain themselves. So they decided to work as in the restaurant industry where they could work less time and make more money. Now, of course, you have the tipping structure in the US, which is non-existent in the rest of the world, by the way, where people actually earn a living wage. Here, for example, you don't need to tip people because they earn a living wage. I still do. And I get yelled at for doing that, but I still do. I never will not, because that's just, that's something that won't change. But you really don't have to. People earn a living wage here and even in Europe to a degree. So, but in reality, in the United States, what ends up happening is you have people who can't really do the careers they want to do, or you have people that end up trying to just do things for money, try to get a career in something that is, profitable. So not everybody can work in tech. Not everybody can be a techie or a computer programmer. Not everybody can be a doctor or a lawyer. And even doctors and lawyers, I have friends who are graduating from nursing school or nurse practitioners and all of that. And those people, they're supposed to make a lot of money, right? But the loans they have to take out before they make a lot of money are now coming back at them. And then on top of that, you have the tax issue where they take so much out of your paycheck depending on where you live. And then so you end up making a lot less money than you initially were told you were going to make. And then you still have to pay those student loans. You still have a car payment. You still probably need a rental payment or a mortgage payment if you're lucky, if you have a mortgage, and so on and so forth. So the reality is this for a lot of Americans, even Americans who are so-called middle class, who really just can't even afford to live. And so when you compare that to Russia, it's just people here have just more money to spend on things, but at the same time, it's not as, for us, for example, if you're making U.S. wages here, yes, it's definitely better. But if you're making U.S. wages, you should be able to live in the U.S. comfortably. More and more people are saying they can't. It's impossible because they don't. The amount of money you have to spend is too much. So that is one thing I want to pose to you all. Why exactly are you willing to do that, and what can be done? And I've been thinking about this because tax season is coming up, right? And I, even though I don't live there anymore, have to pay taxes in spite of the fact we are one of the only, I think we are the only country in the world that forces people who are not residents anymore to pay taxes. If you're an American citizen, you have to pay taxes, even though you don't really live there. And I have to pay taxes to Russia. So I'm thinking to myself, why the hell do I want to pay taxes to freaking go and kill people all over the world? I don't agree with this. If we look back at the American Revolution, we understood why the United States decided to have a revolution. Well, because they really, the bulk of it was they didn't want taxation without representation, right? I feel like we have that scenario now. There's like, why would you continue to pay taxes if these taxes aren't going to help people out? The whole point of taxes was everybody's supposed to give. And by the way, that's a very socialist type of thing, right? You give a little bit and it all goes in this little, bank, and everybody gets to benefit off of that, right? Roads and blah, blah, blah. Look at the state of our roads. Look at the state of our trains. Look at the state of our infrastructure. So where's this money going? It's not going to Hawaii. It's not going to the people in the Midwest. It's certainly not going to Michigan. It looks like a world war in where was it? What's the city? Detroit. Detroit looks like it was like bombed half the time. It still looks like that. It's not going to Louisiana. There's so much poverty there. Mississippi, Alabama, the South. It's not going to the New York City subway. So all this money that's supposed to go to schools as well. Schools, do you think public education is really good? Because it's clearly not. And I wouldn't put a child in a public school right now with the way they're teaching them things and so on and so forth. So really, this money is free money that we're giving to the government that doesn't represent us. So I think if we're talking about a legitimate cause, that could be a way to do it. If everybody withheld from paying taxes, or if there was a movement that said we don't want our money to go to these places and we're going to stop, it doesn't help if it's like a handful of people, but if it was like done on a massive scale, that could be a way to actually stop the government, or sort of have some sort of contention, at least when we're talking about solutions made, because this was thought of during the student loan thing, right? Well, what if we don't pay our student loans back? What are they all going to do, right? So that's one thing that I thought of. Jamie, I just wanted to show this meme as well because I thought it was funny, right? And I added Netanyahu. So the Zelensky one was there, but I added Netanyahu. We literally have them as dependents. We're literally paying for Zelensky's house in Miami. We're paying for Netanyahu to do all of this. Does that not bother people enough, right? Does that not bother people enough to do something about it? I don't know. I don't know. To me, it does. I don't want my taxes going there, especially if I'm forced to pay them, even though I don't live there. The next thing, if you can pull it up as well. Sometimes I can't see these things because of sanctions, so I have to go look at what I wrote on my thing. Let's see. Okay, so Whitney Webb added this whole thing, right? And this is just going along the lines of the Rafah attack. And again, this is where we're talking about how people don't see the relation of things. So Winnie Webb said, if you can just go to her tweet first, right? She said, many people who called Netanyahu a mass murderer for turning Israel into a Pfizer laboratory don't complain about him mass murdering civilians and kids in Gaza. Funny how that works. Well, for this, I have to say the obvious answer to me is the difference between how we view in the United States Arab people, Muslim people, right, and Jews. And you have this facet of the right that feels that the Judeo religion, the Jewish religion, has more in common with the Christian religion when you're talking about going into biblical terms and that, so on and so forth. So there's this weird scenario that we saw with the people in Canada, a lot of the people in the United States who were very much anti Pfizer, anti big pharma, but suddenly, and they called, you know, those people Nazis, but when it's suddenly Israel doing this to kids, they completely tune the other way. And this is where I mean by inconsistency. Like, again, this is all part of the same thing. These are all the same people. These are all the same people. The big pharmaceutical companies, the defense industry, the intelligence apparatus, all of them are all the same people. So when you pick and choose what thing you're going to be pissed off on, depending on whose life you value more, because they're Muslim, there's no consistency there. And really, I despise seeing the inconsistency in that. And I think this also comes from, again, not just the racial issue, which I think is an actual issue that people don't want to talk about because they think everything is woke. And I do have to say, there's a difference between the liberal agenda of trying to weaponize minorities and weaponize racism and weaponize gender and all these things for votes or for political manipulation. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist. That doesn't mean you can't ever say that there's some sort of inequity of sorts. And, you know, it's obvious that there is, at least especially in this issue when it comes to Gaza and when it comes to how people don't care. And that's been admitted by so many people. When we talk about Ukraine, for example, and Ukrainians coming into the United States, by the way, during the war, so many people were like, oh yeah, like let them in, let them come. It's fine. We're going to take Ukrainian refugees, you know, that sort of thing. It's just not the same. And so there is this dynamic that I think the American public does need to deal with. And it doesn't have to be in a way that is, you know, weaponized by either end of the spectrum. It's just in a way that is honest and dealt with. And then that's how you move on. But we have a history that Russia talks about all the time, this history of colonialism. And Russia has said many times, when we were a part of the Soviet Union, we actually were able to understand that because we've had, you know, issues with the fascism, and the Soviet Union easily joined forces with the African anti-apartheid movement. So that it wasn't a difficult situation. So that is something that I think in the United States we really don't have anymore. We've lost that aspect of understanding that. And I think it's become this thing where a lot of people don't talk about it because they're like, oh, it's just a woke thing. And it's not. Like there are elements of that are exploited, but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And that is going back again to a more collectivist understanding that I think so many people are afraid of as well. So, whoa. Okay, so we can remove that one, Jamie, and put on the next one. I think there was, yeah. Okay, so this is what I wanted to show you. There's so much that I haven't been able to put up about Russia, but you saw the Tucker Carlson clip at the beginning of the show where he's literally in a station and it looks like a museum. Yeah. Well, okay, so this is Russia. This is a typical Russian mall is a little bit less flashy, but it's still very nice. I was in Florida for Christmas and I went to a mall and it was literally, it was dilapidated. It was completely just broken down. Half the stores were closed. More than half the stores were closed. It's still a mall that's operating, but it was basically there was nothing there. It was basically done. And then I go to malls here in Russia and I see they all have like nice restaurants, nicer restaurants than a food court. Like not just a food court, but like actual restaurants inside the mall. They have like it's just gorgeous, and you don't see that in most of the United States. You might see that maybe in certain malls in LA, for example. But even then, if you go outside of West Hollywood or the area where there is a mall like that, the rest of the malls look like nothing. So this is one of the best malls in Russia. This one is huge. It's called Europisky Mall. And this is just one of the areas where you can just go to. They love fountains in Russia, and you can just go to, and I just took a video so you all can see. It has like, I think at least 4 or 5 floors. I think 5, if I'm not mistaken. I'll have to go back and count. It looks like something out of the future. And the only other place I've seen like this, I think on videos, is China. China has a lot of these type of even more advanced type of structures. And this was on a weekday. There's a lot of people going everywhere. There's every store you can possibly think of, from furniture stores to clothing stores to shoe stores of various kinds. You have to, it's impossible to walk through all of it in one day, I think, unless you go very fast. They have different restaurants of all kinds. They also have a food court, but they have the restaurants as well. And it's kind of crazy because the state of the US is obviously in decline. And I think Russia is coming up. This is why I say, like, they're coming from decline to incline, and we're coming from being high to low. And it's really sad to see, really. And I'm thinking what could be done. I'm not saying, you know, a mall represents the best status of the people, but I am saying that people are out there and they are spending money, unlike what you are led to believe about the sanctions, that people are out there and they are shopping, that they are doing things, that they are living their life. This is not Russia, you know, right after the fall of the Soviet Union, which is the idea that people have when they think about Russia. And that has to be dispelled entirely. People need to come here. People still are afraid to come here, and you shouldn't be afraid. If you're not, you know, high profile political analyst or some sort of journalist, and you're just a regular person, if you come here, you'll be fine. I mean, they're not going to do anything against you. But if it's obviously riskier if you're talking about this stuff like I am, or like others who have come here are. So yeah. And there's one other thing I think that we added. Yeah. So Putin has declared that Russia is a step away from producing cancer vaccines. Now, I don't really have the details of all of that. However, I find that interesting considering the United States is having a very strong uptick in the cancer rate in young people. Younger people are getting cancer, they're dying of heart disease, so on and so forth. So I find it really interesting that Russia has been public about this, because I don't know, there's a lot of conspiracies that I don't even know if they're conspiracies at this point, that have said that have found that people who've talked about cures for cancer have been found dead, and so on and so forth. And I don't know, like, it's something that I would be hesitant to say, but if Russia is saying it, believe me, they have the receipts to back it. Putin's not going to say something of this magnitude and not have any sort of receipts to back it. So I find that interesting. I also find it interesting that here you don't have the GMO stuff. It's been outlawed. They don't really have an affinity for the chemical stuff. People are more hesitant to get even vaccinated themselves here, I noticed. So it's kind of interesting that you see this happening, especially with the talk of, you know, is Russia under the WEF? Is Russia going to go along with everything? I don't think so. There has been a lot of talk about that. I don't see that. One, because the Russian ruble, that's going to be the digital ruble, is not going to be tied to the central bank. they're completely going away from any Western dominated thing. So I don't really see how that's going to go in that direction. Further, the Russian bureaucracy that exists is still so strong. It's going to take some time before Russia gets technologically there. They're trying to advance technologically, and I have a disagreement with some people on this issue. If countries like Russia, say, and others countries that are largely targeted by the West don't advance technologically, they're going to be susceptible to intervention. It's just a fact. And the way things are advancing with technology, if you look at the AI stuff, that's getting out of control, right? The AI stuff is already, it's out of control. If they don't advance technologically, they're going to be pushed out. There's no way that countries are going to survive sovereignty wise if they don't keep up. And so countries like China are major power players in that. And I think Russia is obviously going in that direction. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be a part of this, technocratic oligarchy that Europe wants. That doesn't make sense because it doesn't make sense geopolitically. They're trying to go in a different direction. And the West is trying to go in this direction. If you think all of it is theater, you're missing the entire point of the reality of the ground, the reality of the completely different process of just the way they process information, the way things are even done. There's completely different points of views, and to say that all of that doesn't matter because they're all in on it just is really reductive. And I haven't found any evidence to suggest that Putin is just going to go along and allow this whole thing to happen, even if at one point he tried to be a part of NATO. If at one point they did, he just explained it. They tried to have peace. I said this before, he's more of a liberal, and they've tried to go that route with the US, and now they've realized they can't, that this isn't going to go anywhere. And again, I was in a meeting with a politician for Russia. I got to attend, and we got to ask some questions as to how they view the United States. And this is somebody from the foreign ministry. And they basically said that there is no going back. Like, the United States does not want to work with that. The United States does not want to have any sort of peace. That this is an existential fight for Russia, essentially, and that Russia is going to continue on their mission of the special military operation. So I just don't see how it's possible that all of that could be happening as some sort of theater representing everything else. So that's just my 2 cents on all of that.